Hello and welcome. How's it going? Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Thank you for stopping by. I'm Justin with NRN, the No Bull Racing Network, and I hope you're having a great weekend cooking out and grilling and doing whatever it is you may be doing, welcoming in this Memorial Day weekend. And I hope the weather is nice where you're at, because right now in the Carolinas, it's not really great. We got that tropical storm thing kind of coming up here, so it's bringing with it buckets of rain. But thank the good Lord above that the weather stayed clear yesterday out in Charlotte, North Carolina for the Coke 600. I was out there to view the race. Man, it was a lot of fun. Had a great time, and the weather was perfect for that. So we'll get to that race later in the show. But I tell you what, if racing was a holiday, it would have been yesterday. The top three racing series in the world, Formula One, IndyCar, and NASCAR, all having big events yesterday. So we will get started with the race that morning from Monaco. So let's start with Formula One. Instead of spelling redemption R-O-N, like in the movie Anchorman, we spell redemption with Ricciardo. To no fault of his own, Ricciardo lost the Monaco Grand Prix a few years ago, but this year he was on a mission to secure that win and win his first ever Monaco Grand Prix. He set the fastest lap in qualifying to earn him the pole, which is very important at a track like Monaco. Mainly the race to me has always been the qualifying, because passing is kind of non-existent on this little tiny street circuit track. So when Ricciardo got that pole, I was like, dude, great shot that he could win this race and redeem himself from that Monaco race a few years ago. So he gets on the pole, and he was able to hold on and win that race, led every lap of the 78-lap race. But it still wasn't easy for the Aussie, because he was having power trouble on that car, and he was actually losing speed. But he was able, despite all that, he was still able to keep that car just about a second ahead of Vettel. Almost said Vadel. Through that whole race. Lewis Hamilton would run third for the majority of the race. Didn't make a whole lot of noise. His tires were really kind of fading, as was everybody. Everybody was really struggling on the tires out there. And that would be your podium finishers. Red Bull would pick up the win with Ricciardo. Ricciardo would win his first ever Monaco Grand Prix, his 7th career Grand Prix win. Ferrari would finish second with Vettel, and Mercedes would come home third with Hamilton. The rest of the top 10 would look like this. Raikkonen would finish fourth in his Ferrari. Valtteri Bottas would finish fifth. Esteban Ocon had a great race, finishing sixth for Force India. And speaking of having a good race, Pierre Gasly would finish 7th for Toro Rosso. Nico Hülkenberg would finish 8th. Max Verstappen would come from last to finish 9th. And scoring the last point would be Carlos Sainz for Renault. The race overall, I did not like it. In fact, I took a nap for about 20 to 30 laps and was Snapchatting with a friend of mine through the majority of it. Dull, I would say. Not a whole lot of action, and the pace was very slow. The cars were going about 7 seconds slower than they were in qualifying. Monaco is a fun Grand Prix to watch because of its historical nature, obviously, and I love it on the calendar, and I always look forward to it every year. It's fun to see those F1 cars roar through the streets and all, but however, it's not very exciting race. I mean, because you can't pass. So once the lights go out and they get the grid, I mean, unless someone really screws up out there in the first corner, you're kind of stuck where you're at. It's impossible to make passes out there. Of course, I say that, but of course, you can't tell that to Mad Max Verstappen, who started dead last on the grid, and he was able to make his way into the top 10, but still, not a whole lot of action in that one. Pretty much where everybody started was where they came home in the finish, but still very happy, though, to see Daniel Ricciardo get the win. He's very deserving of it, and I was happy to see him win the race. He's a good fella, and that belly flop that he did into the pool, very impressive. Looking at the championship, though, Hamilton is still at the top, 14 points over Vettel. That's still pretty tight there at the top between those two. Ricciardo gained some ground with the win at Monaco, but he's still 38 points behind Hamilton. So that's a big gap to overcome, especially with Ferrari and Mercedes running like they are. Mercedes, though, is starting to pull ahead just a bit in the Constructors' Championship. They're 22 points ahead of Ferrari, so that's a bigger gap there in that point battle. Red Bull is in third, 69 points behind the leader. The next race will be in 2 weeks' time from Canada. One of my favorite racetracks. Very quick, very fast. Love that place. Love to watch them roar down that long straightaway to that little tiny chicane. A track that Lewis Hamilton could easily get back on winning form there. I expect him to do very well at that track. After the Monaco race, it was time to go IndyCar racing, though. Around lunchtime on a beautiful and hot afternoon, the green flag waved on the 102nd running of the Indy 500. Ed Carpenter would lead early all the way to the first round of pit stops, which would be on lap 31. Lap 48, the yellow flag would come out for James Davidson, who crashed in turn 4. He was running slow on the racetrack, which he really shouldn't have been doing because he was going very slow out there. And Takuma Sato got into him because you only have seconds to react with a slow car like that when you're going 220, 215 miles per hour, and you got a guy way under that. So those two would end their days coming together. Lap 58, the caution would come out again for Ed Jones. And when the race resumed on lap 63, Tony Kanaan was able to finally get around Ed Carpenter for some variety up at the front. And he took the lead of the race, but that wouldn't last very long. Ed Carpenter would take the lead back from Kanaan. But then right after that, Danica Patrick would bring out the caution, which that's not a real big surprise there, is it? But Patrick's final race ended a bit short, and I did hate to see that. I was actually thinking she would have a good Indy 500 in her last career race. Would be a good one, but just like the Daytona 500 was cut short, this 500 miles was cut short as well. The race resumed on lap 74 with Kanaan in the lead over Ed Carpenter. Kanaan, he led to lap 90 before making a pit stop and giving the lead back to Ed Carpenter. Kanaan would cycle back around to the lead, but would have to come back to pit road when he sustained a puncture in that right rear of the car. He'd have to come and have that fixed as they crossed the halfway mark. 250 miles in, and that's about where his race was ending up. Will Power would take over the lead of the race. The race would stay green for a good while, taking it all the way to lap 138 before Sebastian Bourdais would spin, hit the wall, and end his day. Those cars just way too hard to drive. A lot of cars, if they would get sideways or get a little bit loose, that was it. There was no chance of saving it with the new downforce package, so we were starting to see that happen to some big names. The race would restart on lap 146, but the very next lap, speaking of big names, Helio Castroneves would crash coming out of turn 4, bringing out the caution again, and more big names would be taking an exit from this race, but business was starting to pick up as they were coming to a close in the race, and another caution would wave on lap 155 for Sage Karam, hitting the wall at the turn 4 exit. But what was amazing was Alexander Rossi. He started second to last in this race, and by lap 170, he was in the lead and looking for his second Indy 500 victory. So coming up through the field like that, where it's difficult to pass, and with the car being like it was, absolutely brilliant. He was making all these really great passes to the outside of cars, which was just very ballsy, to say the least. Tony Kanaan was also making his way back towards the front after having that tire puncture earlier, about around the halfway mark of the race. But he would spin and crash too, and so Tony Kanaan's day would be done just 12 laps from the finish of the race. With 8 laps to go, Oriol Serva was leading, and he didn't get a very good start, so Stefan Wilson would take the lead from him, and Stefan Wilson would find himself leading the Indy 500 with just 6 laps to go or so. Will Power was coming, and he was charging, but I don't think he was going to have enough time. He got up to third, but it didn't really matter because with 4 laps to go, Stefan Wilson and Jack Harvey both hit the pits because they had run out of fuel, and Will Power would inherit the lead of the race, and he would go on to win the 102nd Indy 500 and the first Indy 500 of his career. That was a good race. A very good race. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Indy 500 this year. I wish the cars wouldn't have been so maybe difficult to drive, and we might could have seen some more racing and passing, but I still thought it was an exciting race. It kept my attention the entire time, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out. It was a very surprising finish, and the Indy 500, the last couple of years, they threw up a graphic during the race, the last couple of years, and I hadn't thought about this, but going back to 2017, the pass for the lead has basically come right down to the end, and this year was no exception. It was a very fun race, very entertaining race. Will Power wins his first Indy 500. Roger Penske gets a win. And if you were speaking of Will Power, you were just wondering when he was finally going to get that win. When you look at a resume that Will Power has up to this point in his career, you kind of wonder, well, where is that Indy 500 win? Well, now he's got it. He's finally done it. And very wacky race with all the crashes, though. Lots of drivers taken out of that one. The top 10 would follow as this at the end of the Indy 500. Will Power would finish first. Ed Carpenter, who started from the pole, would come home in second place. Scott Dixon third. Alexander Rossi from second to last would finish fourth today. Great run for Alexander Rossi. Ryan Hunter-Ray would finish fifth. Simon Pagenaud would finish sixth. Carlos Muniz would finish seventh. Joseph Newgarden would finish eighth, and I kind of expected more out of him. Same with Robert Wickens. He finished ninth, and Graham Rahal would finish in 10th. And that is the top 10 finishes of the Indy 500. Good race this year. So now that that's done, now we move on to the final stage of the racing that day out in Charlotte. We went to the race. It was great. To end the night would be the NASCAR action from the Charlotte Motor Speedway and the running of the Coca-Cola 600, one of my favorite races. In fact, the very first NASCAR race I ever watched way back in 1998 was the Coca-Cola 600. And Kyle Busch, he killed them out there. I expected him to do well. I didn't expect him to do that damn well. But I went to the race. With my good friend Kels, who went to her first NASCAR race. And you know what? I think she enjoyed it. She said she'd go back anyway, which is good. Because I remember the last time I took a girl to a NASCAR race, she couldn't stand it. I went to the Bank of America 500. I'm trying to remember the year. Maybe it was 2015, 2016, something like that. It was the one Kevin Harvick won. Which I can't remember the year now, but she said she'd never go back to another one. In fact, we left halfway. But hey, we made it through this one, and I was kind of debating, like, maybe the 600 shouldn't be her first race because it is so long, but anyway, we made it all the way through, and I actually thought the racing was pretty good, despite the fact that Kyle Busch won all four stages in that race, and that out of 400 laps, he led all but 24. I still thought the race was good. There was enough drama going on to keep it interesting. The racing, they ran side by side a lot of it. I thought it was good. I thought it was good racing. I would have liked to have seen more up at the front, but I still thought there was enough storylines going on out there of guys coming from behind. Kept it interesting enough. Kevin Harvick started at the back, and I kept joking on Twitter about how long it would take him to get to the front before he was leading the race and then riding away with it. But before the end of the first stage, he was in the garage, man. He had made it all the way up to the top 5, and it was looking like, yep, what I thought would happen. Before the end of the first stage, he'd be up there. But then he hit the wall, and Harvick's day was done. He had to take it to the garage, and that was huge. Everyone got to their feet. No one could believe it. And I told Kel, she had no clue. She has no idea who Kevin Harvick is or how good he is. And I told her, I said, that is huge. She's like, why is that huge? I was like, because I thought he was going to win the month of May. He'd come from dead last all the way to the top 5. So he was done. And so he wouldn't win the month of May. But I got to wonder. I just have to wonder. What would the race would have been like if Kevin Harvick hadn't crashed? I mean, would have been as easy for Kyle Busch? Do you think Kevin Harvick could have gone up there and raced with Kyle Busch and maybe won a couple of stages? It might have, because Kyle Busch, after Harvick was gone, he was like a class of his own. I had a stopwatch on him, and he was constantly running, in the low 30s for a lap time. It was just an amazing car, and it just never missed a beat. Because you often think that, like, the 600, since it's so long and there's all that transitional stuff that's going on throughout the race, that cars come and go. One guy who is good in the day may not be so good at night, and and vice versa. But Kyle Busch, that team never missed a beat. That car was good from the start all the way to the finish, all the way. But Kyle Busch would win his first points race at Charlotte. He's never won a points-paying race at Charlotte. He's won the All-Star race, but he's never won a points-paying race at Charlotte. So he gets his first Coke 600 win, which is just crazy when you think about it. And now that he's done that, he's officially won at every single track on the NASCAR circuit. Amazing, right? Absolutely amazing. Rowdy Busch, may not be popular with the fans, but dang, he is good. He's really good. And last night he proved it. Was on point for 600 miles. 400 laps around that track. Was on point. Never missed a beat. Never missed a beat. But anyway, I'll give you a quick top 20 rundown from the Coca-Cola 600. Kyle Busch would be your winner. He would win Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and Stage 4. He won everything down there. Kyle Busch would pick up the win in his Toyota starting from the pole. Martin Truex Jr. would finish in second place, still having problems with the pit crew. There were several times when he had to keep coming, he'd come into the pits up front, he'd fall to the back, and then he'd have to get to the front. So still having problems there, but towards the end of the race, he was starting to look like he was a car that could contend with Kyle Busch, but still about 5-some seconds off the pace. Denny Hamlin would finish in third. Good run for him. Good run for the Toyotas. Top three in the Toyotas, and Joe Gibbs' cars were looking solid there at the end. Brad Keselowski would finish fourth. He had trouble early on in the race. Went a lap down. He got his lap caught back up and fought his way all the way back into a top 5 finish. So good job for him. Jimmy Johnson would finish in fifth. That's a stellar run for him because, this has been a bad year for Jimmy Johnson. I remember back in the day when it went to Charlotte, Jimmy Johnson was always the guy who picked to win because he won there all the time. And last night he had a really good run and finishes in fifth. Jamie McMurray was sixth. Solid day for him. Kyle Larson was seventh. He spun out, but he fought his way back to the seventh position. Kurt Busch would be eighth. Alex Bowman ninth. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would finish in 10th. Chase Elliott would finish 11th. Clint Boyer would be 12th. Eric Almirola would be 13th. Paul Menard 14th. Daniel Suarez would be 15th. Bubba Wallace Jr. would finish 16th. Matt Kenseth would get that car up to 17th. Good job for him. Good effort. He's still trying to turn that team into a winning team. Michael McDowell would finish 18th. Eric Jones would finish 19th. And Casey Kane would finish 20th. And at one point, Casey Kane was running in the top 10 with that car. So that team showed just a little bit of promise at one point during the race, but they weren't really able to get the finish I know they wanted. But still, 20th, good effort. So that's the top 20 finishers from the Coca-Cola 600, which, like I said, not a whole lot going on up front, but I still thought it was a pretty decent race. Also, this weekend was some SRL League racing from Abu Dhabi. Bart Cadelda, he would start from the pole trying to wrap up the championship, which he was able to do. That point that he gets for getting the pole was enough to give him the championship of the third season. And then he had a pretty easy day after that because his work has been done. He won the championship, and there wasn't a whole hell of a lot to do after that. He had it wrapped up. Lewis Marshall would win the race. He'd go on to do that. He'd had some bad luck, it seemed, over the last couple of weeks when I started watching these. So he snapped that bad luck with a win, so good job to him. He won some 20 seconds over Renee Vanderstapp, who would finish in second, and Sandro Dulis would finish third. And he told me before the race that he wasn't too happy with the setup of the car, but despite all that, he was able to go up there and get him a podium spot, fighting a car I know he really didn't enjoy. So that is going to earn Sandro Dulis the No Bull driver of the race. Congratulations to the podium finish, and congratulations to the podium finishers and Lewis Marshall for getting the win, and a big congratulations to Bart Cadelda on winning the SRL Championship. So lots of great racing going on out there this weekend for Memorial Day. Hope you enjoyed it all, and we look forward to seeing the racing next year, don't we? So next up, we got Pocono on the way. Oh man, not a big race to get excited about, but who knows? I have to see if Kevin Harvick can get back up on his winning form. Right now, there's just the two cars, isn't there? I mean, if something happens to Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch wins the race. If something happens to Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick wins the race. It's just the two cars. What is going on, man? Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Justin with NRN. Enjoy your Memorial Day. Stay dry out there, especially if you're in the Carolina area. And take it easy. See you next week after Pocono. Adios.